Good morning, and welcome to the Queensboro Arts Center. Please welcome your moderator for this morning, Tanisha Mallette. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Little theme music. It is Women's History Month, so happy Women's History Month to everyone. Welcome to Leading with Purpose, Stories to Inspire the Next Generation. We are so glad that all of you are here. Before we get started, a gentle reminder, please turn off the cell phones. Also, you were handed index cards when you walked in, so please feel free to write down any questions that may come to you during the conversation. Staff members will collect them and bring them up so that after our brief conversation, we can share the questions that you have for our guest. So are you ready to get started? All right, let's welcome our first guest. Congressmember Grace Meng is serving her 7th term in the United States House of Representatives, representing New York's 6th Congressional District, which includes Bayside, the home of Queensboro Community College. Grace is the first and only Asian American member of Congress from New York State and the first female Congressmember from Queens since former Vice Presidential nominee Gerald D. Ferraro. In Congress, Grace serves on the powerful House Appropriations Committee, where she is the ranking member of its subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies. Grace also sits on the National Security, Department of State, and Related Programs, and is New York's senior member of the Appropriations Committee. The House Appropriations Committee is responsible for funding the federal government's agencies, programs, and activities. Before being elected to Congress, Grace served in the New York State Assembly, and prior to entering public service, she worked as a public interest lawyer. Grace was born in Elmhurst, Queens, and grew up across Elmhurst, Bayside, and Flushing. She attended local public schools and went on to graduate from Stuyvesant High School. From there, she headed to the University of Michigan before earning her law degree from Yeshiva University's Benjamin Cardozo School of Law. Today, Grace is raising her family in Queens, where she lives with her husband, Wayne, and their 2 sons. And of special note, Queensboro is extremely grateful to Representative Meng, who took the lead in New York's congressional delegation to secure $3.1 million to build a child care center here on our campus. So please join me in welcoming Congressmember Grace Meng. And now our next guest. Tarika Mensah Esquire, a Jamaica, Queens native, is the Chief of Staff and Special Counsel to Queensboro President Donovan Richards, Jr. She manages a team of 65 staff members, focuses on compliance, policy, and is a principal legal advisor to the agency. She serves as a liaison between the Borough President's Office, city agencies, and elected officials. Most recently, she has led on issues regarding the New York State Downstate Community Advisory Committee for casino licenses, cannabis legislation, Rikers Island, groundwater flooding, in Southeast Queens, and the Downtown Jamaica Task Force. She previously served as Assistant Corporation Counsel, litigating on behalf of the City of New York and its agencies in personal injury and property damage claims in state court. Tarika graduated cum laude from the University of District Columbia David A. Clark School of Law, earned a Master's of Urban Planning from Hunter College, City University of New York. She served as, let me not forget this last one, and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Howard University. She served as the editor-in-chief of UDC's Law Review, where she led symposiums celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act and examining the impact of marijuana legislation at the state and federal levels. She is also a wife and mother with a strong commitment to public service. Tarika is also a member of the Queens Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and Queens Chapter of Jack and Jill of America. And also of note, we also would like to thank the Borough President's Office for $3 million to make our library more accessible for our students. Please join me in welcoming Tarika J. Mensah. And our third guest probably needs no introduction, but I will give one anyway. Dr. Christine Mangino serves as the 6th president of Queensborough Community College in the City University of New York system. She truly came up through every level of education, starting as a preschool and elementary school teacher, and then moving into higher education as a faculty member, department chair, dean, and eventually provost and vice president for academic affairs at Hostos Community College. Dr. Mangino is a first-generation college student, which really shapes her commitment to student success and equity here. She began at Nassau Community College, went on to earn her bachelor's and master's degree in elementary education from Hofstra University, and earned her doctorate in instructional leadership at St. John's University. Beyond her campus work, Dr. Mangino is actively involved in national higher education efforts. She serves as a peer evaluator for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, contributes to the American Association of Community Colleges, and collaborates with several research and leadership organizations. She's also an Aspen Presidential Fellow and was recently invited to join the advisory board of the Association of College and University Educators. Please welcome President Mangino. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully you can hear me, okay. So we're gonna get right to it. I read rather, some amazing bios, but we all know, in the words of Drake, you started from the bottom, now you're here. So let's go back a little bit. If you could share a bit about your educational journey, what you studied and why. And we'll start with you, Congressmember.
Well, thank you so much to President Mangino and to everyone at QCC for having me. It's such a joy to be with you. And as we squeeze in this last day of Women's History Month, there's no better way than to close it out with my amazing friends and all of you here. Education, wow. You know, my parents were immigrants and they came to this country in the 70s, and then I was born a few years later. So my parents didn't really have much of a say or knowledge about the educational system here in New York or around the country. And so, you know, for my college, I went to Michigan. I had never visited before. I literally went because someone came back to school and said, it's a great place. And I got some scholarship money, and so there I went. And then later on for law school, again, like my parents worked in a restaurant. I didn't really know how to ask them for guidance. I used to watch a lot of Law and Order, and I wanted to be a lawyer just like them. That's my fancy explanation for how I ended up being a lawyer.
But that's okay, it goes to show paths are not linear,
Yeah.
so. Tarika.
So I have an interesting journey. I do love Law and Order as well. But my grandmother in the 70s, there was a strike in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and she decided to start her own school to educate her kids at home, and then it became her neighbors, and then she had her own mini private school independent school in Brooklyn. And so I, along with my parents, all went to that school, K through 8, and then I went to Benjamin Cardozo High School. That was my first time in New York City Public Schools. I was in the dance program there, but I did always have a strong interest in leadership development and giving back to my community. So one of my teachers there started a program called Leaders, and I joined that for a class period. And after Cardozo, I went straight to Howard University. When I visited that campus, I was inspired by the stories of the leaders who went there, by the commitment to excellence from the professors and the student body. And then I came back to New York, and I didn't know what I was going to do after I graduated from college. I graduated at 20 years old, and so I worked for the Flushing YMCA. I was a camp counselor, and then I ran a Beacon Center in Junior High School 189. And I enjoyed that experience so much. But the YMCA was doing tuition reimbursement, and I was like, oh, I should explore this, and I really do want to go back to school. And so I went to Hunter College, and I did urban planning, where I focused on community advocacy and planning. I did projects in Brownsville, Brooklyn, studying neighborhoods and seeing what ways that they could see improvements from the city, state, and federal government. And after that, while I was at Hunter, I said, I'm still not fulfilled. I want to do more. I always wanted to go to law school because I watched Law and Order. And so I took the LSAT and I went to law school, and that is my very curvy, bumpy journey on my path to becoming an attorney.
And President Mangino.
So my dad had stopped out of school in the 9th grade. My mom was a high school graduate. College wasn't ever talked about at home. But then in high school, I realized like a bunch of my friends were applying to colleges, and I'm like, oh, I guess I need to do this. And so I had applied to NYU, and then I applied to Nassau Community College. And NYU said, thanks, but come back in a couple of years, which was probably the right thing because I don't know how I would have even afforded it at the time. So at Nassau Community College, I majored in hotel restaurant management because it just sounded like fun. And sitting in one of those classes, I was looking at the faculty member and I realized like, hey, that's what I want to do. I want to become a faculty member at some point. Knowing that you had to get a doctorate. So I figured, all right, so let me start with elementary school, and then later on in my life, I'll go back to school and get a doctorate and then teach at the college level.
And what I love about all three of your stories, which I think is a great teaching moment for all of us, is it's okay not to know what you want to do and to still start, to do something to move forward. It's okay. So I now will ask, how did you begin to connect the dots between this is what I'm learning and this is what I like to do? And I guess we'll go work backwards this time.
So as I was taking hotel restaurant management classes, I was also working as an aerobics instructor. And I realized that I loved the teaching for the clients of the machines, right? I liked the classes and stuff, but actually being able to teach them that, I'm like, ooh, this is really where I need to be. And I also had time in my life where I started to be around little kids, and that's where I was able to make that connection that, all right, I want to teach elementary school and work with little children.
I would say that during my time when I was working in Flushing, I dealt with a large new immigrant community, and at the same time I was getting the master's in urban planning. But the parents, even though I was the Beacon director, would come to me and say, hey, I need to write a letter to my landlord because English wasn't their first language, or could you help me apply for this particular FAFSA and things like that for their children. And a lot of times I would say, sweetheart, this social security number, is not working in the system. So we would have other discussions about different paths for the students there. And so that's when I knew that I really wanted to go to law school to really help communities that didn't have advocates and folks in housing court and criminal court and all the areas. And so I would say it was my experience in the community.
Well, you already know why I went to law school and how I got involved in politics and government. That was never part of the plan. I was such a shy kid growing up, even like up until college. And when I went to law school, you always expect politicians to be a certain type or to look a certain way, and it's usually not a minority woman. And I realized when I was applying for internships, like I didn't really have an interest in working for like a corporate law firm like a lot of my classmates did. But when there were internships that were in the public service world, and I realized, hey, not every lawyer, you don't have to be the smartest in the class, you don't have to be the wealthiest, you don't have to have a fancy title to be able to help someone and to make a difference. And then I would see these internships where they were like, oh, we could use, I speak Chinese, Chinese, someone who speaks a second language, or someone who understands minority immigrant communities. And I was like, hey, that's me. And so that's slowly how I got involved in the world of government and public service.
So you've established yourself, you've not established yourself, you've figured out what you want to do, and now you're starting in your career. What was it like getting started in your field? And dare I say, as a woman, but what was it like as an individual just starting out?
Not easy. I didn't know. All right, so you already know I went to law school because I watched Law and Order. It wasn't the most informed decision. And then I decided to run for office, never having even been to like a Democratic club, right? So not very well thought out either. But I thought that, this newcomer could do a better job than the person who was there. And so I jumped in and ran for office, the New York State Assembly. I didn't make it the first time. And then 2 years later, I tried again. So it was a very bumpy beginning, but I just thought I have something to offer.
I didn't know any attorneys really in my immediate circle in my life. However, there's only 2% of attorneys who are Black people, and so a lot of times when I went to court, people would ask me if I was the secretary. I would have opposing counsel. We would be waiting outside the courtroom. They would be talking about the details of their argument. Never imagined that when we got in that I would be the person, and they would say, you are Teresa? And I'm like, nope, I'm Tarika. And I was standing right next to you the whole time that you were discussing and coming up with arguments to go against all those points that you were talking about outside the courtroom. And so I would say that there was not a lot of representation, but I had to throw imposter syndrome out the window because I had a job to do. And so I think a lot of people have a hard time pushing past that feeling, but that was something that I worked on early on.
It took a long time to find a job. I graduated, I kept sending out resumes to every district on Long Island and New York City and really wasn't hearing back. I was a substitute teacher for like a year and a half, and I agreed to anything. I subbed for gym, and I was a school nurse and a librarian and every grade under the sun, and still wasn't getting a position. So then I ended up taking a job as a live-in counselor for a group home of teenage boys who were from 12 to 16 who were in foster care, and I did that for a year. And then I went and started teaching pre-K for a couple of years and finally got into the New York City public schools where I was able to teach third grade. So it took a while.
Am I the only one who feels like they're learning a lot about their president today? So I wanted to talk about something that I think each of you sort of brought up, this feeling of not knowing what you're doing and suppressing the imposter syndrome and still moving confidently. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's a real thing. It's when you start something, sometimes you don't feel like you can do it, but you must, and you should. So I don't know anyone who would like to just share what that's like moving through that.
I can start. I really related to Tarika's story outside of the courtroom because to this day, and I've been in Congress for about 10 years, I still get asked, I get like carded at work, right? They're like, oh, are you a spouse? Are you an intern, right? I get that almost every week, right? And so I think that, fast forward a little bit, right before, I always think of my grandmother as my political mentor. She's 101 years old.
Wow.
Never went to high school, probably not even middle school, but she's the one that gives me the best advice. And when I first went to my first job when I got elected in Congress, it really felt overwhelming because most of the people in the room did not look like me. There weren't many women at all. It's still under 30% women. And so I came back that first month and my grandma said, I hope you're not being shy and quiet in those rooms. And I'm like, how did she know? And I was like, I don't have a lot in common with the people in the room. Like, I don't know what to talk about. She's like, you're not sent there to talk about what they're talking about. You're sent there to bring the stories of Queens families who might have no one else to represent what they need and what they're working on. And so you're supposed to be talking about something different. So because of that and my job now, I've learned to value who I am and the experiences that we all have, even if it looks different from other people.
I will say that no matter where I am, in law school, I will outstudy. I will put everything into what it is that I'm doing. So I always know that I'm prepared. And so for a while, being the only, or being from a place like Queens, where a room looks like this, and then you go into Queens State Court, and then it looks like a different world because it's white men. That's who dominates the field when you walk into courtrooms, even in the borough. So I think about my ancestors and their journey here, and then the young girls who are coming behind me. So I know that gives me confidence to do it, because somebody else, I'll represent, be that one person in the room for somebody else when they come behind me.
I think when I decided to go back to get my doctorate, before that first class, I was really nervous about going to that class and then realizing I wasn't smart enough to be there. And it took a couple of classes where I was like, okay, no, wait, I think I got this. But it was really nerve-wracking. And I think another time was when I became provost at Ostos. And I was like, oh no, there's nobody behind me. Every decision ends with me. And I can't say, oh, let me check whip, right? That took a little bit of getting used to it and figuring out how to hold that.
I know we have a very tight schedule, so I want to move to something else, kind of jumping forward as your work now. Working mothers, for some of us, new working grandmother, congratulations. And in some of your stories, you went back for other degrees while you were still working. So can you talk about what it's like to balance work, families, your career, staying focused, trying to stay confident in rooms that you're still struggling with? How do you make this all work?
I could share. I went back for my doctorate. Originally in my head, I thought, all right, when my kids are teenagers, that would be the good time to go back and get my doctorate. In reality, my daughter had a health emergency, and I ended up quitting my job and staying home with her and then having my son. So I was with them, and when they were like 2 or 3, I was like, you know what, this is really the right time to go back, because one, I felt like I was losing brain cells and needed to have real conversation. But it was hard, right? So there were times, and I share this story with people all the time about how not to feel guilty. You know, when I was typing my dissertation at the end, and I had a deadline in my head that I had to get it and be done by the time my son went to kindergarten, because then I had to go back to work. Mm-hmm. And so he was watching this TV show every morning for like a half hour in silence, and I could get a good 30 minutes of typing in. And after I finished my dissertation, I sat there to watch it with him, and it was SpongeBob SquarePants, and I was horrified at the lack of language that was happening in that show. But he's a functioning adult at 27 now. And so, you know, you got to give yourself grace, right? And you can't be the best at everything in every moment. So I really just try to be really present where I am. So if it's with my kids, then I'm with my kids. If I'm at work, then I'm at work, in order to survive.
I will say that I'm in a phase of balancing it all. My children are 6 and 3. And so I have little ones. And so at work, sometimes people say, I forget that you're a mom. And then, you know, when I'm home, they're like, you never forget work. You're always on the phone. My daughter's 3, and she's like, I'm emailing the borough president. And my son had an event at school the other day, and we went out to eat after, and I had to step out. So he's like, are you going to call the BP? And I was like, wow. So I think that there is no such thing as balance for me. I just do it every day. I think that training in law school, like studying for the bar exam, is like isolation for 10 weeks, and working and going to school. So just practicing early on that when you have a goal, you just drown out all the noise and do what you can in every category.
It's so challenging, and my kids are in their teens now, and I would still say that in some ways it gets easier, but you never feel like, oh, I got it. This week, I did such a great job this week, right? And there's a lot, I don't know if it's like part of being a woman or a mom, there's just like a lot of guilt, right? I always tell myself that when I'm home, I don't take work calls and I don't do emails or any of that. And then last night, my son was like, wow, when mom's on her phone, she's just in another world. So I was like, okay, just because I'm not on a laptop and on my cell phone doesn't mean, to me, I'm not working, but to them, they're still seeing it as a distraction from them. But I would say that, similar, like it is very important to give yourself a little grace. I tell myself if I was a stay-at-home mom and if I had the luxury to be with them every single second, I would still feel guilty and I would still feel like I wasn't doing a good enough of a job. And that's one reason when Dr. Mangino and the whole QCC team, when they came to me about a child care center to be built here, I loved, we fund a lot of projects throughout Queens. This is one of my favorite projects because we know what it's like to have to go to work and not have the balance and the support. And we want the best for our students here.
Before we open it up to questions from students, I just wanted to ask one last thing. One of the things that you often hear when you're a student, or even now, you learn from your mistakes. Failures is, where you get the most growth, but failing hurts. And it's really tough sometimes to turn those wounds into wisdom. So I don't know if you can share a mistake or a failure that you overcame and how you moved through that painful time.
So I'll go first. Before I was president here, I had applied for the presidency at Nassau Community College and really thought I would get it because I was an alum, right? And it made sense, and it was such a public event. So the 3 finalists were in Newsday, and my campus was following it along. So there's a lot of gossip and politics involved in the whole event. And so everybody knew. And so when I not only didn't I get it, but one of the people that I was in the process of going through the Aspen Presidential Fellowship with in my cohort, he got the position. And it stung. And I felt like it was a public failure, and it was really hard to sit with that. Now, and I always tell this to people, like, well, if you don't get it, it opens the door to something that you would have never dreamed of, right? And I am so blessed that I didn't get it, because I really feel like I landed in the right place for me at QCC, and at the right time for the college, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't get that position.
I like to think that it's never a loss, it's a lesson. And so I'll say that I took the LSAT twice. That was one of the things. The first time, I was very confident. I bought a book and I did a little Starbucks circling and multiple choice. And I went and took the exam, and my score didn't reflect what I thought that I needed to get into a school that I wanted to go to. And so I used that opportunity to say, okay, I was on Hunter's campus. I was a graduate student, but they had a pre-law department for undergrads, and I decided to go there. And my brother was a student at Hunter as well at the same time, and we took the LSAT at the same time for my second time. And so I found the resources that I needed, a pre-law advisor who helped me look at essays, who gave me free LSAT prep that was so rigorous. I was in Queens, it was in Manhattan at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, but the lesson from the first loss was that you need to go reach out to your network and see what resources you have to do the best you can do. So it's never a loss, it's just what's the lesson.
I love that. It's a perfect segue. I have 2 examples. One, it's not mine, but the governor of New York State, Kathy Hochul, she is our first female governor. Prior to her becoming the lieutenant governor, she had lost her congressional race. It was a really tough race. She lost it. A lot of money spent on both sides, but had she not lost, she might not have had the opportunity to be the governor. For me, I think one of my lesson moments, probably what would have been a totally different turning point for my life's path. After law school, when I was graduating law school, I was interviewing for jobs. I made it through every step of the application process. I think I was I passed step 3 out of 4. The job was also related to Law and Order, by the way. Full circle, almost. And I ended up not getting the job. And so I was really, really upset for days. But had I gotten that job, I would not have volunteered for a campaign. I would not have gotten involved in politics. And so that would have been a completely different path. And I'm so thankful today, hard to see at the moment of disappointment, but so happy that I didn't get that job.
Okay, we only have 15 minutes left, so I'd like to open them up to the questions. I got a couple before we started, and someone just raise your hand, if you need me to come to get more. But one that I received was, can you share how you make difficult decisions as a leader and how you guide others through that process? For anyone.
How you make what kind of decisions? I missed it.
Can you share how you make difficult decisions as a leader and how you guide others through that process?
I can go. I recently became the chief of staff to the borough president in December, and we have a staff of 65 personalities, different people from different walks of life. And I think a lot of times I have had to learn that let your yes be your yes and your no be your no, because sometimes you make a decision and then you get 55 opinions after you've made the decision. But I also like to take time to think about it. A lot of people want an immediate answer, and I said, well, can I get back to you tomorrow? And I could be driving, and then, it comes to me, the thing that is the way that we're supposed to go. So I take my time now. I don't let folks rush me, and I don't let people persuade me from the right thought process of what I was originally thinking. I can hear and listen, and not to say that you won't get any good ideas or good feedback from people, but it's hard, like the president said, of being the person that the decision sits with, to not be easily swayed.
This sounds kind of cliche, but sometimes you just got to go with your gut too. In your gut, your conscience will kind of guide you. And sometimes there are 2 good decisions to be made or 2 bad decisions, tough calls. But a lot of times when you are steeped deep in your work and your network and your community, whatever that is, if I really can't, I go with my conscience.
Just keeping an eye out on the floor, okay?
I think asking, getting feedback, understanding the full situation, so talking to the people who it impacts the most, and then being able to explain to everyone why you made that decision is really important.
And I apologize, I want to make sure. Is there a question? I got it. Pardon me, sprained ankle. Oh, you're good. No. Okay. What advice do you have for someone, and I think this is leaning more towards you, Congressman. What advice do you have for someone who wants to become an elected official and constitutional law attorney?
Oh, that's really specific. I'll answer it from getting involved in general or running for office. I think a lot of times people will ask me, they'll say something like, not that this is you or anyone here, where should I move to? Because I want to be an elected official. And then I tell them that's the wrong question to ask. Because when you run for office, it's not about a fancy title. It's about giving back to the community and helping the community. And it's going to be a hard sell for you to win an election if you can't convince the community, or at least 51% of them, that you care deeply about them and that you're willing to invest your time and energy regardless of if you are able to run for office or to win a seat. But I would say, know your community, get involved. I think of it, you're like a small business owner. The voters are like your customers, right? You need to know what they want, what they need, what they like, and be a good listener and what you can do to help them. And that is what can help shape your narrative to run for office.
I had one more that I had received before, so I'll go to that one while we see if there's any more from the floor. I think it's very simple. Make sure I read this correctly, sorry. How do you recognize and celebrate Women's History Month, and why is it important to celebrate?
I think that we should just celebrate women every month and for their contributions. So I do like months that highlight, cultural celebrations and history, but I think that if we move with the spirit that this should be something that is regular for us to acknowledge women's contributions. I learned so much about the Congress member, that she was the first Asian American from New York State to be elected to Congress. And I said, wow, if I should have known that already, but we should celebrate stuff like that every day.
I think a similar answer, right? I think it's because we don't learn enough about women in our history, right? So that's why we have this month, which we should never have to have because it should be embedded in all of our curriculum throughout school. But until we get there, it's really important to celebrate the accomplishments of women that are not represented in the curriculum.
Everything they said, and I literally was thinking the other day, I haven't done enough for Women's History Month, so thank you for allowing me to end it on a good note. I am. But I will take the liberty, and I hope I don't sound political. There's a lot in the news these days. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that might make people feel like we don't belong, or we're not American enough, or you can't use certain buzzwords, DEI related. But I will say that every single person in this room and your family and your history and your contributions and culture matter a lot. And they mattered before we had official designations for months like this. Our stories matter a lot. And no matter what's happening in the news, no matter if it's Women's History Month today or not, you all have the ability to be able to influence others and to make an impact on the lives of people around you.
So we have 3 questions. 2 are kind of related, so I'm going to put them together, and my apologies to the 2 people who sent them if this was not your intent. Queensborough was recently awarded $1 million to establish an artificial intelligence hub on campus, reflecting how quickly, it is together, that makes sense, reflecting how quickly AI is shaping how we learn, work, and communicate. From your perspective, how will AI impact the next generation, and what qualities will young women need to lead with purpose in that evolving landscape?
I think that we have to be careful with AI because as college students, I also teach at Queens College, and I went back to paper exams because of AI. I was like, everyone is sounding the same. Everyone got 100. What is on Brightspace or your laptops that is making everyone so perfect? And so I don't want it to rob, especially college students, of the ability to do your own critical thinking. I think it can be a helpful tool. It can be your assistant. It can organize your life, but it can't take away the ability for you to figure things out on your own. If you have to say, how do I email my boss I'm not coming in today? Because I get ChatGPT emails about that kind of stuff too. If you don't know how to do that, then I say we need to go back to the basics. But if you're using it for good and not to be your own brain, then I think that when you need to take the LSAT, when you need to write things in law school or wherever you go next in your job, you don't want to not be able to do it because you only relied on AI.
Well, I'll say that everyone, including Congress, needs to learn more about AI. And I say that because you will see in upcoming weeks and months and years about politicians, including Congress members, trying to legislate and regulate AI. But the truth is, most of us do not know enough about it. And that's one reason, and I won't go into details. I know there are efforts here at QCC. We've been working very closely with CUNY. The two CUNYs in my district are QCC and QC. And so we are doing what we can to bring more funding and resources, to beef up resources for our students at these two schools. This is one of my top priorities. I want our students who attend these two colleges, I have to be biased towards my own district, to have the best resources at your fingertips. And I want these schools to have the resources to be able to not only train students, but we're working with the teachers union to train teachers as well.
We have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to give it to this last question that came from the floor. Can you discuss or identify anything from your childhood that you think contributed to your great resilience in achieving your goals?
So it wasn't an easy childhood. There was a lot of different deaths in my family. When I was at elementary school, high school, my father was an alcoholic, and then I also had to wear a brace for scoliosis in middle school, which was really hard, because now I'm sure they're much different, but at the time it goes from your neck to your, all the way down to your halfway down your bum. And you can't move, right? Like you really do. So it was really hard navigating middle school and puberty during that time. So I think all of that, my mom always used to tell me, you know, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And I was always like, you know, I don't want to be tested. I don't want to be tested. But I think that's really helped me. And then later on, I became a volunteer. I was on a crisis hotline for suicide, for the Long Island Suicide Hotline. And that training really helped me, even in today's job, where I always tell people, like, you know, it's not an emergency unless we're calling 911. You know what I mean? Like, things happen, yes, but we can't get so stressed by every little thing, because life just keeps hitting you, you know? So you got to take a breath and take it as it is.
I think just being open to different opportunities. But one thing that my mother did that stuck with me is she wouldn't let me quit something if I signed up for it. So she's like, you said you wanted to go to karate, you got to finish what I paid for. You can't quit. Now, and that, and I say that to my children now, because my son's like, he wants to sign. I said it to him. I was like, you want to sign up for karate? You can't quit. I paid for it. But just to stick things, the lesson is to stick it through. Even if something seems uninteresting, every day won't be glamorous, but you said you were interested, you said you wanted to do it, so just stick it through for then. Don't be miserable forever, but do what you said you were going to do.
I think for myself, it wasn't so much my experience, but being around people like my grandma, who I talked about. You know, this is a grandma who has a strong accent, right? She came here in her 30s, and doesn't have much of an education. And she would watch us because my parents were working all the time, so we just always hung out at her house. And she would take us on the bus, and she'd be like to the people around her, can I teach you English? Like, to strangers on the bus? And I'm like, you have such a strong accent. Like, it was fascinating to me that she was almost unaware of her limitations, but she still wanted to help people, strangers, on a bus. And then similarly, my dad, who grew up really poor, his mom died when he was, I think, 2, and his dad couldn't afford him. So in Taiwan, and then so he grew up pretty much in an orphanage. And so when he was raising us, he wasn't a typical Asian parent, if you will. He never asked if we got good grades. Like, if I failed everything, he probably wouldn't even have known. But he was always like asking questions like, well, did you help anyone today? Like, you know, what are you doing to help the community? So I think that made an impact.
I thank you all for being so candid today, sharing your journeys and how it shapes your leadership. I feel like I've learned a lot and been inspired. I hope the audience has as well. Can you please thank our guests for joining us this morning? And with that, that concludes our program.